Hello there, and welcome to Lecture 3 of Unit 4. Unit 4 is Industrialization. In Lecture 2, our focus was on industrialists and how they were able to make such huge profits during this era, and how the government policy of laissez-faire, no government involvement, allowed the industrialists to be extremely successful, really at the expense of the workers. So Lecture 3 today, we're going to focus on labor unions, how the workers decided to stand up and demand some rights since no one else was keeping their best interest in mind. So our focus today will be on labor unions, their successes and failures early on, and most of what they did early on were failures, but they did come together and demand better treatment. One of the biggest arguments for trade unions were the workers argued that America was becoming not more free, but less free due to the fact that the economic system was unfair. The rich were getting far richer, really, while the poor were remaining poor, not really making any substantial gains in their income or their livelihood. So the unions decided that they were going to organize and fight against some of their biggest complaints. They were going to fight against the use of child labor. Remember, I told you that close to 50% of the workers in certain industries, in factories and mines, were 10 years of age or younger. They were going to fight against low wages. There was no such thing as a minimum wage. There was an abundance of workers, and so most of these jobs, as industrialization occurred, were unskilled jobs, so they could be easily replaced, and so they really didn't have any ground to stand on in demanding higher wages. Another system they were tired of was the piecework system, where they got paid for every item that they produced. This was usually in factories. And also unsafe and unsanitary working conditions. Employers were not responsible for providing any safety protection for the workers in mines and so forth. And so as a result, the United States was an incredibly dangerous place to live during this time if you were a lower class worker. Just another statistic here. For a family of 4 to live at this time and be above the poverty line, they needed to make $530 a year. And on average during this era, a family of 4 in the lower class was taking home $380 a year. So significantly less below the poverty line. So how did owners and industrialists justify this treatment of the workers? Why did they not just give in and pay higher wages? Well, these are some of the arguments as how they defended their actions. First of all, they believed higher wages hurt corporate profits, which prevented them from opening new factories, expanding the economy, and so forth. They believed that if they paid lower wages, they could hire more workers. They could, have more workers instead of fewer workers. Some believed that if they did pay their workers more, that these additional wages, anything that the workers had on top of what they needed to absolutely survive on, could possibly be spent on gambling, alcohol, other vices. So basically they're saying, we're going to keep you out of trouble by paying you less. The majority of Americans at this time were fearful of the unions. I thought they were radical, and probably most importantly was the government up until this point in time, and for quite some time into the future, the government sided with the industrialists in labor disputes.
You gotta fight for your right.
And so the first union was created, the National Labor Union, in 1866. It consisted of mostly skilled workers. Those were people that worked in mines, steel workers or in mines, some unskilled, and farmers, and it allowed no women or African Americans in the National Labor Union. There was over 600,000 members. It laid the groundwork for future labor unions. It didn't really have much success. There weren't enough members, and they were not very well organized. But they did, they did start the idea of unionizing, getting people together, and standing up for their rights. This group was an interesting concoction of people. The Molly Maguires, were Irish immigrants that worked in mines, mainly in Pennsylvania. And this was not an official union, but they fought for their rights, and they did lead to some, they did promote the idea of banding together in order for better treatment. Anyway, the mining industry was one of the most dangerous occupations that there were. There were many mining accidents in which many miners were killed. And at this particular area, there had been over 600 miners killed in various mining accidents. And so they were demanding better treatment. And the mine managers weren't really listening to them, so they decided to take it into their own hands, and they started an outbreak of violence in which over 20 mine managers were killed. Now, if you are a union and you want to get better treatment, this is not the way to go about it. You need to garnish the sympathy of the public. And when you go start whacking off business owners or managers, you are not really going to gain support of the public. Anyhow, 20 were put on trial and 10 were eventually executed. Here is some evidence at one of the trials. This note that was written, it says, "Notice you have carried this as far as you can by cheating the men. You three bosses, be careful if the above don't be your house in a short time. From a stranger who knows you." You can see by the writing, these people were not all that well educated, but yet they still believed that they were being treated unfairly and that they were going to do what they possibly could to stand up and demand better treatment. Next came the Knights of Labor. The Knights of Labor was the first union that experienced some success. It was founded by Uriah Stevens. It was more broad. It was open to all, including African Americans and women. In 1870, there were 9 members in the Knights of Labor, but by 1884, it consisted of over 728,000 workers. They had some very specific goals. They wanted an 8-hour workday. Most workers at this time worked 12 to 16 hours a day. They wanted an end to child labor. And again, it's not necessarily, they did believe that it was wrong to have children working in these dangerous conditions, but also this just put so many more competitors into the workforce. It gave industrialists more options, more opportunity to get away with lower wages. They wanted equal pay for men and women, something that, in many parts of the country we're still striving for today. Improved working conditions and compensation for job-related injuries. If you're hurt on the job, if you were hurt or killed on the job back then, the owners simply were required to do nothing about that.
It's the hard knock life for us. It's the hard knock life for us. Instead of treated, we get tricked. Instead of kisses, we get kicked. It's the hard knock life.
The Knights of Labor supported arbitration over strikes. Arbitration is a very critical component of labor disputes today. Arbitration you hear about sometimes in professional sports and other labor disputes. Striking is one of the most drastic measures a union can take. And in order to avoid strikes, sometimes an arbitrator will be called in. So you have management and you have the workers, and both are making demands. Maybe the workers want higher wages, less hours, they want vacation time, sick time, whatever it may be, and the owners aren't willing to give that. And so an arbitrator comes in and listens to both sides, and then when arbitration is binding, which is most of the time, then both sides have to agree to what the arbitrator has decided. And usually it's some sort of compromise, somewhere in the middle, that gives both sides some of what they are asking for. Unfortunately, there was an incident that severely hindered and eventually destroyed the Knights of Labor. There was a strike going on in Chicago, and a policeman shot and killed a striker. And as a result, some workers decided to rally at Haymarket Square in Chicago. A bomb was planted and went off, killing 7 policemen. The police started to open fire on the crowd. 4 people were killed, and anarchists were responsible for this. The Knights of Labor were blamed, although they were not really responsible. The public associated the Knights of Labor with violence, which eventually ruined the Knights of Labor Union. The American Federation of Labor was the next union to emerge, and they would become the most successful. They were established by Samuel Gompers. They were more specialized. And there are many professions that have unions today, and in most cases, there's a teachers union. Sometimes doctors have unions. Workers at Walmart are not allowed to have a union, but workers at maybe a grocery store have a union. So depending on what your occupation is, what you are concerned with might be different. And so the American Federation of Labor was more organized and more specialized. The American Federation of Labor is still around today. It merged with the CIO in the 1900s, and today it's the AFL-CIO. Anyway, one of the most important contributions of the AFL was this idea of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is another tactic that is used by workers no matter what the occupation is. If I go over to Mr. Silk's office and I say, Mr. Silk, these juniors are a tough group to handle. I need a raise. I need a raise in order to come to work every day. I'm working my hardest, and so forth. He's probably just going to laugh. But if there are 112 teachers in the Corvallis School District and all of them decide to go over there and ask for a raise, he's probably going to be a little bit more willing to listen. So that's what collective bargaining is. Bargaining as a unit rather than as an individual. And you hear again collective bargaining frequently with professional sports. The collective bargaining agreement is going to run out, so they need to renegotiate it in order to prevent a strike and so forth. So as a result, these unions were established. In the next lecture, we're going to take a look at some of their measures that they took, and we'll see that the early unions were not very successful. And in the next lecture, we'll take a look at why. But what they did accomplish was they did begin the process of organizing and demanding better treatment, and this idea would not go away.